Well, I was going in Starbucks the other day, the one where intern Paul's wife, Katie, works. And I usually end up seeing them somewhere in there. Usually Paul's sitting down working, or maybe Katie working. So I go in the other day and Paul's sitting there, so I go and I say hello. And I walk up to the counter and the woman looks at me up and down and says, "So, how do you know Paul?" So I explained to her how I knew Paul. We had a nice exchange. Would you believe it? I walked out of there with a free drink. I was like, that's pretty cool. So I go in the next day, and Paul's not there, but Katie's working behind the counter, and so I talk with her, and people are like, well, how do you two know each other? So I explained again. Would you believe it? I walked out of there with another free drink. So I go in the next day, neither one of them are there, but I realize I know every partner, every employee who's working there because I've talked with them. And we're laughing, we're joking, it's like I'm one of their club or something. And I'm like, I'm going to get another one this time. Well, let me say, it's who you know, but they have to be there for you to get the free drink. I walked out with nothing, but I thought, it's pretty cool because if you know intern Paul, you're in. That's it. You get that chance to get that drink. That's going to quench my thirst every day. But we want that, don't we? We want that quenched thirst. We want that better life, that better possibilities, that better future. The Israelites wanted that too. They were wandering in the desert. They were on their way to a better life. And they stop and they look around them in the middle of the desert and they become thirsty. And they say that great line at the end of the first reading, "Is the Lord among us or not? God brought us here. Where is God?" I realize how we say that same kind of thing from time to time. In the midst of hardships, we say, is the Lord among us or not? Where is God in all of this? When we hear news reports about what's happening in Africa and Libya, what's the fallout in Japan after these earthquakes, is the Lord among us or not? See, our Lenten journey takes us toward the cross and makes us just pause and reflect and say, where is God in all of this that is happening? How do we see God? How do we know God? Is the Lord among us or not in the midst of suffering and tragedy? See, we want to know that. We want to be known by God. We want to be in that in crowd that knows and quench that desire of thirst that we have within us to know that. That's why I love this passage of the Samaritan woman from John, because I think she kind of comes with the same attitude and with some of the same questions that we have. She comes along in the midst of an everyday task of gathering water and encounters this Jewish man who makes a risk to talk to her. And also, she risks being in dialogue with him. Jews and Samaritans don't like each other, to put it mildly. Jesus says he knows some things about her. Now, I think this passage has a slant. We have always tended to read this passage thinking that Jesus is pointing out her immoral transgressions or her sins, sexual immorality, things like that. But I have to be honest, as you read the passage, we're unclear as to what he's pointing out behind her. We could read this to say that we don't know what happened with these other husbands. Perhaps they all died. Perhaps they divorced her and she was left living with anyone, because a single divorced woman in the ancient world is not in a hopeful situation. But what we know, what we can be clear about, is what he knows about her. And what Jesus points out and knows about this woman is her pain, her brokenness, the suffering that she knows, the questions that she has. Perhaps in her wondering, she's saying, where is God in this life for me? She's thirsty to know that kind of life. And she tells Jesus that you know things about me, Jesus. That must mean you are one of those prophets I've heard about. That means you know something about God. Tell me, Jesus. Where is God in all of this? Is God on Mount Gerizim or is God in Jerusalem? That was the Samaritan Jewish debate that went on and on. Where is God in this world? Jesus' answer to her is unique. He says, I am. The original Greek leaves out the he. He says, I am, which we know is the name of God. The name that God gave to Moses when he says, who should I say sent me? God says, tell them, I am sent you. Jesus is saying, I am. God is here, right in front of you. Jesus is the I am for us. The God who is among us. For God knows what it means to suffer. God knows what it means to be us, to have these questions, to thirst, to want to know what life is, to want to be in that in crowd that knows, has the inside track. Being known by God is what opens up for this Samaritan woman the opportunity to know God, to see God standing right before her. And for us, being known first by God is what transforms us, so that we can open up and know God more fully, to see God who stands amidst us, to be noticed. Being known first is that message of grace that we experience. This woman is transformed. It says she's no longer thirsty because guess what? She leaves her jar and goes into the city and preaches, or witnesses rather, to those who she was trying to avoid in the first place. And I love how she witnesses with a question. He can't be the Messiah, can he? It makes me think of what happened on Monday. We were doing our flash mob on Monday at this place up in Grapevine, and I noticed as we were talking that the woman who was waiting on our table was listening listening pretty closely from a safe distance to overhear what we were saying. We were asking all these questions as a group. Where is God in the midst of the pain and suffering that we experience? What does this mean for us to be Christians when we can't see God? How do we live in the midst of the injustice that's all around us? We're asking all these questions, throwing them around at the table. And she stopped and came up to us afterwards and said, hey, I just want to say, y'all are an interesting group to eavesdrop on. And I said, well, tell us more about that. And she said, in her experience, some churches aren't willing to kind of ask those questions about how do we be Christians when we don't see God, and how do we wrestle with these things when we don't always understand. And her words were more or less saying, this was refreshing for me. You know, I don't think faith is always about having all the answers. But the Samaritan woman, she goes and she witnesses with this question. Notice, she doesn't wait until she has enough Bible passages memorized to talk to her friend about God, or till she can recite the Apostles' Creed without looking to invite someone to come to church. She just says, come and see this one who knows me better than I know myself. Come and see this one who knows something about me, who knows what it means to be me. Come and experience this one. Well, he can't be the Messiah, can he? Let's talk about it. Your faith happens in dialogue in this way. In this kind of wrestling in a community. That's what's great about this place, about you, the people of this church, because you're willing to push the envelope a little bit, perhaps try something new, but all in the name of inviting someone to come and know the one who knows us better, far better than we even know ourselves. We're willing to do that. Because if we cut ourselves off from that, we perhaps cut ourselves off from true life, from the God who is alive and among us in our midst. Jesus calls this Samaritan woman and calls us today to a new reality. Living into a new reality of God's presence who is among us, with us, around us. Where is God in all of this? Well, Lent reminds us to look to the cross, to look through the cross of our pain, our brokenness, and to hear the bold proclamation of God, the grace of God knowing us, and of the hope that comes from beyond, the hope of life lived here and now. Thanks be to God.